Welcome to Uncomfortable Growth Uncut, where we celebrate those who defy fear, embrace growth, and live without regret. In this episode, we peel back the layers to reveal the person behind the profile with Aimee Buchanan. Aimee shares her deeply personal uncomfortable growth story with the death of her mother at 10 and how it shaped her ascent in the media industry. Discover how Aimee's personal trials have influenced her professional ethos, her leadership style, and her perspective on life and work. So welcome to Uncomfortable Growth Uncut. This episode is still part of the series, The Person Behind the Profile. Today I'm talking with Aimee Buchanan, who is the CEO of Group M for Australia and New Zealand. In kind of context, that's a huge job. So she heads up multiple media agencies that fall under Group M. And she's one of the most respected people in the media industry. But today we're really interested in not just recognizing what Aimee's achieved, but learning from her as a person and hearing from her uncomfortable growth stories that she's gone through. So welcome, Aimee. It's great to have you on.
Thank you for having me. What an introduction. I'm a bit nervous now.
No need to be nervous. So the thing I always like to start with is just really being, kind of not structured and just hearing first from you. What would you like to talk about today? What are some of your uncomfortable growth stories?
It's funny because I was thinking about this obviously earlier today, and you go and we were just chatting, you go quite quickly into the moments in your career which you've had incredible growth, and I've got a couple of kind of aha moments that I could talk about. But if you asked me and you introduced this as the person behind the profile, I think my most uncomfortable growth moment that has probably defined me more than anything in my life is my mother passing away when I was a little girl. So she died when I was 10 of cancer, and I don't talk about it very often. I'll try not to get emotional. And for me, that would have been the most defining thing that's happened both in my personal and professional life, and I think has been the fuel that's motivated me probably for most of my life, both positively and sometimes probably negatively. And from that, a lot of growth came. My again, I've never actually spoken about this publicly, so it's, you've got me at a vulnerable moment. But my brother and I cared for my mum when she was sick with cancer. She had cancer for 5 years. And so from the age of 5 to the age of 10, we led this quite unusual life. When I think about it, I think, gosh, I'd never do that for my children, but a lot came of it positively as well. But we looked after her through her illness, and as such, probably grew up younger than most kids grow up and had a lot of responsibility. I recall one of my really early memories was going, mum saying we need to get some food from the supermarket, and me going, I can do that. And at 7, getting the bus and going down to the supermarket and doing a whole grocery shop, and coming home and paying $150. Remember it super clear because I was very nervous that the bill would go over the $150 mark. And paying at the cash register and having to put a couple of things back because I didn't have enough to get the cab home by myself as this 7-year-old.
Wow.
And I think back to that and I think, God, like what was everyone thinking? But I also think the responsibility, the sense of value for money, of working for that, of caring, of providing for it. I also bought lots of random things that I got to choose because I was doing the
And you
shop.
were 7.
I was 7. I had a lot of chocolates and candy and all sorts of things. But I think it taught me a lot about what's important, about the responsibility, about not taking things for granted, around creating your own destiny, appreciating what you have and the moment you're in. That has fueled a lot of, I think, the values of how I lead and how I show up. and the drive that I think I have because of that. So I don't
mm.
know if that answered your question. It was way off what I prepared to tell you. So.
It absolutely, I mean, does answer the question. And, just even, hearing your story, you just think, wow, a 7-year-old. Like, could you imagine, having your daughter at the age of 7 go to the supermarket and
No, I mean my daughter's 8, so I think it's
uh-huh.
funny. I think about it a lot right now. Maybe that's why I'm talking about it. And I think about the innocence that she has and lack of understanding of that. Like I'm grateful that she doesn't have those experiences, because I
Mhm.
don't think any kid should go through
Mm.
necessarily some of the things that we went through. But no, I can't. I can barely give her $3. And like we gave her $5 as a bit of an experiment a couple of weeks ago and said, this is emergency money. And she went to the canteen that day. So no,
It
not
was an
sending.
emergency, Mum. I needed the,
I'm not
whatever
sending
it
her
was.
to the shop for with any
Yeah,
money.
yeah. But I think it's always interesting when you go back to things that happened to you when you're young. I mean, we know now from a lot of psychologists and neuroscientists that 0 to 8 are actually the most formative years.
Mm,
And that creates actually what you see as normal. So again,
mm,
whether it's a positive context or in your case, a difficult context, it does so much to shape the person we'll become, because it's when our brain is just sucking in everything. It's the most neuroplastic. You don't have a baseline.
mm,
It's just normal. It's just what
mm.
happens and what needed to be done. And so I love the fact that you drew on that story, actually, beside it being just a wonderful insight into you. It's so impactful in connecting to who you are today, like you were saying.
Yeah, and what you just spoke about from a normalization point of view is it's so true. I can really clearly recall being at school at 7 and the teacher saying to me, we are doing parent teacher interviews in 2 weeks' time. And me at 7 or 8 or however old I was, putting my hand up and saying, my mum's sick, she won't be able to come to the parent teacher interview. And I didn't think anything of that, because my mum had been sick as long as I could really remember. And the teacher saying, well, she'll be better by then, she's probably just got the flu. And me thinking, well, no, she won't be better by then. But for me, that was normal. And I was looking around that classroom, not thinking that anyone else had anything different going on.
Mm,
So, and in my contemporary world, looking at my daughter and her life's normal, she would never understand that. And it's interesting. I talk to her a lot about my mum. She has my mum's name as her middle name, so we spend a lot of time talking about Grandma Linda.
mm,
And she is so intrigued that you could lose a parent at her age.
mm,
And the normalization of that for me, because it's what I knew,
mm,
is a quite a it's an astounding thing that your brain does standardize what you're experiencing, good or bad.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, just and I like how you were, talking a bit earlier about, things happen and some of them are good and some of them are not things you'd wish for, but they happen, right? Um, but it can often have positive benefits. And,
Yeah.
and I find that is a big part of uncomfortable growth, that even if something is like awful, right? Losing your mother as a young child or having to care for her as a young child, it's awful. You wouldn't wish that on your own children or anyone you know. But what that does is it creates you in a different way. And there are a lot of positives around that. So I'd just be interested, because you made the connection between that and work,
Yeah.
career, and it's defined your life. So what have been some of the positives that have come out?
Yeah, I often talk about this, incredible out of incredible hardship often comes magic,
Mm.
or enlightening sort of moments. And for me, definitely the case. Like, I have relationships, you often try and fill gaps in either skill set or capability or your own personal situation. And for me, the relationships that I've formed, particularly with women around me in my formative years, were very defining. Oh, sorry. And the so I think about, like, my grandparents, my grandmother particularly, I was very, very close to. As a consequence of that, she raised
Mm.
me along with my father, and both grandparents, my aunt, like incredible women who filled a massive gap for me. And I
Mm.
wouldn't have had those relationships as deep as they were or are,
Mhm.
if not for my experience growing up. I think when I think about my career, it's given me resilience. Like, I don't think I fully understood where it came from.
Mm.
Sort of, I do feel mostly I can cope with nearly anything that's thrown at me, and I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I'm quite good at having a calm perspective on how we'll navigate through something, because
Mm.
you've navigated through something that was
Mm.
unforeseen and unpredicted, and and when you get through hard things, I think you realize you can get through a lot.
Mm.
So from that point of view, I think the perspective it's given me on what we do, like, and I love this industry, and anyone
Mm.
who's worked with me knows I'm extremely passionate about it. But 90% of what we do, I have perspective on. We are not saving lives. So sometimes we are, because we have amazing opportunities and we do
Yeah.
great things. And a lot of what we do and why we do what we do is that it's a fun, amazing industry to work in. And for me, I try not to lose sight of that. Like, we're here because it's awesome. Like, let's have fun while we do it, because that's why many people joined our industry, is because it is an incredible place to learn and thrive and
Mm.
connect and build relationships. Um, and I try and keep that at the core of that.
Mm.
Some of the learning that I think, if I was to flip that and go, well, the drive and determination potentially for me, and it was what I intended to talk to you about, um, left me probably with sometimes blinded ambition.
Mm.
And some of my more uncomfortable career growth has come from the moments where I've really had to look at that with clarity.
Mm.
And I think particularly when I stepped into the CEO role of OMD and forced to lead in a different way, in a different level, and a different capability, I quite quickly realized that kind of what got me there wasn't going to get me
Mm.
to where
Mm.
I needed to be. And I had a really just a confronting moment, where I'd start. Our chief people officer, Martin Cowie, had organised this amazing program that we were running, with a guy called Michael Bunting, who he's written lots of books. The one that we were reading quite deeply was The Mindful Leader, but his whole sort of philosophy around 200% accountability in the role that you're playing in any situation, was very confrontingly explained to me he did an exercise with me and my exco where he's like, okay, we're going to do a review. Everyone's done a 360. That's all cool. But then what we're going to do is we're going to give your 360 to all of your direct reports. And you're going to explain to them what you've read out of it. And then you're going to leave the room and they're going to talk about you for an hour and a half. And then we'll invite you back in and they'll talk about the behavior that you display that's impacting them in a way that isn't probably as constructive as it could be. And we went through this exercise and it was a really uncomfortable
It sounds very uncomfortable.
And even the people you gel with, who you've
Yeah.
got great rhythm and rapport with, they sorry, Rowena, I keep turning this off and it's not going. Can I just pause for a
Yeah.
second? Just
Yeah.
try and get rid of it. Sorry. I've shut my Outlook down. It's still beeping at me. Yeah. Yes, I had this very uncomfortable moment where everybody around the room had to tell me the sort of one behavior that they'd like me to work on. And it was uncomfortable for everyone because I think giving feedback is hard, and it's particularly hard when it's like it's repetitive around a room with 15 people telling you the thing that you're not good at or the thing you need to nail down. But it was incredibly enlightening because it was the moment I think I realized as a leader the impact that you have on
Mm-hmm.
the people around you, both personally and professionally. And I think the stat that Bunting gives is that a leader has a 50% impact on the mental well-being of his or her direct reports. And I think at that point I went, okay, how I'm showing up is not good for my team's well-being, and I need to dig a little deeper and develop some new tools on how to get to a better outcome for them. So uh, long sort of winding story, but I think your early experiences shape you both positively, but sometimes the flip side to that, and in
Mm-hmm.
my instance, my ambition and drive and the fact that I didn't always take everyone on a journey, was very confronting to face into, and was probably one of the most pivotal kind of career moments for me in galvanizing that group of people at a moment in time to go on a journey together on how we would, reset and succeed with that business. Was kind of a big moment.
It would have been a very big moment.
It was a big moment.
I tell you what's really interesting, because I've been doing a number of these podcasts, and it's that there's a very similar theme around what got me to this next level were not the skills I then needed. Like there's just consistent kind of feedback on uh, what I did is not working at this level. I need to refigure it out, and I need to think differently. And the more senior you become, the more you're scrutinized. So, whereas maybe before you're like, oh, yeah, I'm a senior person in the business. But when you start to get to, that pointy end of the pyramid
Yeah.
structure, it's like everyone's watching, whether you mean something intentionally or not, people will interpret
How
what
you
they
show
see,
up.
how
Yeah.
you show up, what you do, how you lead by example. And I think it's just um, such a such a great insight when you feel like you're the same person as last week. Last week I was doing that role, this week I'm at this new level, but suddenly you're perceived and scrutinized very differently, and that has a massive impact.
I think it does. I think what's fascinating about that is how you respond in that moment. Because I think back to that first couple of months and you're running because you're trying to prove and you're trying to show I've got it. Yeah, I've done
Mhm.
this. And for me, I'd sat next to Hogs for 3 years who'd done the job. So
Yeah.
I think I'd kind of gone, okay, I know roughly
Yeah.
what was going on. But the bit that didn't dawn on me, weirdly, I think in that moment, I got quite clear that what got me here wasn't going to get me there, and I needed to re-establish how I wanted to show up and the type of
Mm.
leader I wanted to be, not the type of practitioner I wanted to be.
Mm.
What made me more comfortable doing it in my own way, which was sort of the next piece, was COVID. And I know that sounds
Mm.
bizarre, but in some ways I'd had 2.5 years of being the CEO of OMD. And I think I'd got to a much better place as a leader and was more well-rounded. But when I felt COVID for me and the ability to almost rewrite the rules
Mm.
because everything we knew had changed. And I when COVID started, 3 weeks after I came back from parental leave with my second child, so I had a 4-month-old. And so quite a pivotal moment in my family's life. But I just loved that we didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow. I felt like I'd entered one of those management training programs, like it was a simulation, and every
Yeah.
day there was going to be a new challenge. I was going to, I thrived in that environment of the
Mm.
unknown. And
Yeah.
and what I loved is that communicating in that environment became very real and gritty.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I found myself feeling really comfortable with doing that in my own style.
Mm.
And until that point, if I was really honest, going through, pregnant, baby, I was emulating how I thought I should do it. What
Mm.
had been modeled to me, I was trying to be as funny as Hogs in our town halls. Never going to be as funny as him. But I found my own way of doing it through COVID. I think the barriers came off. I realized people just wanted to relate to who you were.
Mm.
I needed to do, and I read some amazing stimulus through that time about leadership and crisis. And I found myself a lot more comfortable in my own skin in
Mm.
that window. So you're probably going to tell me the analysis of why that is now.
No. I mean, I love your honesty because, when you're not sure how to do something, you do draw from those around you, so
Mm,
it's really normal to go, oh, okay, so I've seen, Hawks do that job or whoever else. And it's like, oh, okay, that's how they did it. And if you know that what you've been doing isn't necessarily working as well because it's a different level, then that's where you always start. And I personally, I love that piece, but the real growth comes from exactly what you said, which is going, here's who I am. Here's what
mm,
I believe.
mm,
And you have enough kind of samples at your discretion to go, I've seen all these people do it. I've tested a few things myself, but actually now I'm comfortable stepping into more of who I am,
mm.
playing to my
Yeah, it's interesting because and I haven't really reflected on it just till now. So there you go. Something always comes out of. So this could be the best or worst thing I ever say, but I'd never, through that last course before I stepped into my sort of first CEO gig, I had a lot of amazing female clients, female leaders, particularly early agency, like incredible.
Mm.
But I hadn't had a female CEO. And so I think part of my modeling was also trying to figure out taking the bits I knew from what I'd seen from amazing people, but trying to figure out not only how to do it as as
Mm.
Aimee,
Mhm.
as a woman, as a new mother, like I was still feeding my baby, trying to run a company. I mean, I think back to it, I'd never be as crazy as that. And I enjoyed that. Like it was, so I don't know whether I'm slightly twisted because I loved the uncertainty of that period because I
Mm.
think we did things differently. We
Mm.
innovated, we found new ways to communicate, new ways to
Mm.
connect. But I'm wondering whether things happen for a reason at a certain time. I do believe that. And for
Yeah.
me, it was the journey I went on through the uncomfortable growth I spoke about, going into the role, finding comfort in how to do that in my own style in
Mm.
a way that felt quite natural.
Mm.
For me, I don't know if it felt that way for everyone else, but I genuinely felt like I found my feet through COVID, gave me the confidence to take the step to do this job, which is,
Yeah.
and I don't think I would have got there without those two big moments uh, through that window.
Mm. Wow. Yeah.
How did we get here?
I know. I know. But then it's so it's also so fascinating what you learn about yourself all the time. I mean, that's one of the things I'm really passionate about. It doesn't matter where you are, whether you're, kind of just straight out of uni or whether you're a midlife or whether you're more senior. Um, there is just so much learning to do. And, I've always held the belief that, there's so much happening in the world, but there's so much more that happens potentially inside of you.
Mm,
It's kind of
mm,
like that visual of, the big, big world, and then you go into the big, big universe. But actually, there's as much depth and layers inside yourself. And what I love is when they both collide.
mm,
Inside
mm,
part of you that collides with what's happening in your outside world,
mm,
and
mm,
the learning and insight that comes. Because I want to just ask your advice too on an area, because there's a lot of talk about media being a really young industry. I was talking with Cody the other week, and he kind of said, yeah, it's a really young industry. But I personally think that there is so much to give when you get to that point of really starting to know yourself, when you
mm,
can have maximum impact. And if we're all living to, they say that, you and I will be living to 90 plus, and our kids will probably be living to 100 plus. We're only in the middle. So I'm really interested in your views on how you see that tension between what is a very young industry, and what is the perception that as you become a bit older,
mm,
50-ish, um,
mm,
that maybe there's not the same opportunity or potential. And how does that work just with what the world needs? What's the knowledge, the experience, the insights that the world really needs?
mm. Yeah, I think about it a lot, especially as the years go by. Uh, uh, Maybe I'm naive, and I often think I am quite naive about things. My lens on, I think it is a young industry. There's no question. You can look at the stats. It's getting slightly older, but we're talking like a couple of years, not decades.
Mhm.
And it's definitely an industry that, if I take age out for a moment, because I think it's somewhat clearer to me,
Mm.
I think what this industry requires is energy.
Mm.
And my question for myself on, how long will I stay in the industry? How long will my career go? Is more about how much energy have I got to give?
Mm.
Because it kind of comes back to what I was saying a little while ago around, I think a lot of people are drawn to this industry because it's creative, it's innovative, it's fast paced, it's moving at the pace of culture, you're shaping brands, like it's awesome, but that's relentless as well because it
Mhm.
doesn't stop. And so for me, the question I probably have the lens on is, where's my energy at?
Mm.
And as long as my energy is good and I've still got that, you know, zest every morning to go, let's
Yeah.
go get them, let's do it.
Yeah.
I don't feel limited by my age,
Hmm.
but my limit might be in my own mind because I sit here often going, gosh, when I'm 55, I'm not gonna have enough energy. So maybe I've already self-fulfilled that to go my energy. But then you know what? I probably thought at 30 that at 45 I wouldn't have this energy, and I feel pretty energized. So I look, that's probably my more philosophical answer from my
Mm.
personal lens. But when I think there's no question in my mind that experience is an enormous asset. And I do think clients value it.
Mm.
And I think as we compete in different spheres, which we're increasingly going to,
Mm.
I think it's going to require more of that. I don't know how we harmonize the commercial reality to that. That's probably one of the challenges. But if you think about where we're at right now with technology, with AI, so much of what we do and have many of our juniors caught in, endless manual tasks will get done either through AI or through massive offshore centers that everyone's building. The bit that becomes valuable is the experience, the ideation, the strategy. So I feel quite optimistic about that. But again, maybe I'm naive. But yeah.
Definitely not naive. I always like to use the term idealistic.
Oh yeah, that's a much better one. I am slightly idealistic. Do you know what? I'm very optimistic.
Yeah.
And I think look, if I go back in time when I started my career, there wasn't a woman running an agency. And now there are more women running agencies probably than men in this country, media agencies at least. So I think things have changed. And I like to think that will continue to change.
Yeah, I really like your point on, particularly in the current world with AI, as, some of the today's kind of tasks that can be automated or managed offshore at a cheaper cost. Once, as that continues to happen, it means that people are going to be asked to do higher value type of tasks or require higher value skills because you're not having to spend your time on those lower value things that can be automated.
Yeah, I saw a great chart the other day, when you're like, your eyes prick up and you're like, wow, that's awesome. It was looking at the industries that we should recommend our kids go into 10 years ago. And it was all the things you'd expect: analytics, data science, IT. And it had that against where with AI, they're recommending we should guide our children to go into in the future. And it was much more in the sphere of human communications, strategy, because those two things together are kind of the magic. And I think it was again a reinforcement to me that I look at what AI is doing. The tools we have, they're just it's incredible. But I still get half of the stuff and go, it all needs to be rewritten, and it needs a human lens, and it needs emotion, and it needs, and that makes me feel like the value of experience will be never more accentuated than in the world that we're entering into.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's funny, my eldest daughter is 17 and doing her HSC this year, and she's looking at university courses. And it was really interesting because both David and I kind of stepped back and said, you know what? Besides doing what you love, like we don't know, but things that challenge your thinking or things that help you to problem solve or things that make you see connections across industries or beyond, that you can understand what lies behind it. I'm like, they're the things that are those higher order skills that are going to be valuable because they're the things that can't be done, at least not yet, or predicted to be done by AI.
So what's she enrolling in?
Well, she's got her priority program. She's looking at a double degree, and the first one is in uh neuroscience.
Wow.
Yeah, which I think she'll find fascinating. And the other is in sociology. So you've
Wow.
got kind of how the brain works, and then you've got how
Have
society works or how it transforms. So I'm like, oh, that sounds like a really good type
mm.
of combination.
She's obviously a smart cookie like her mum and dad.
She's way smarter than we are. So just won't tell her that, okay? Us parents, we need to keep her
Keep it
keep a
driven.
card up our sleeve. So yeah, but there is going to be seismic shifts,
Shifts.
and it will enable a lot of opportunity, but we also have to be able to develop those skills,
Mm, mm,
to be able to then, if I'm not getting paid to do this because it's now done
mm,
by a machine, I'll get paid for this because these are in demand, these skills now.
mm,
But,
mm.
you know, what do they look like? Have I got them developed? And I think that comes back to, in my head, I'm just making connections. The point I was making about experience too, experience is the one thing that you can't fast forward.
Mm,
And I
mm,
have to remember this with my own daughter, both of them actually. Like, they can be that they are really clever and smart, but sometimes I assume they have the same
mm,
level of experience as I do, which obviously they
mm.
couldn't, but sometimes I just assume that they do. And I have to remember to be like, okay, just remember how you were at the age of 17, as I cringe when I read my old diaries. Like, it's a mega cringe. But experience is something that you can't fast forward as a human.
It's interesting when you're thinking about workplace design as well. Like I've
Mm.
been talking a lot about it in our exco around the experiences that we curate for our people
Mm.
and the moments for them of growth that you just that are just it's the bit again I just love about the job is that you're
Mm.
in this room, like it's why I like pitching because you get to work with all these people from all around the business. And
Mm-hmm.
last week, you're in a meeting with someone who's been in the industry a year, and then you're in,
Mm-hmm.
and they've got such great ideas and perspective, but for them, the experience of those intense moments,
Mm-hmm.
it's awesome to be part of somebody else's big experiences. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
love that. I love that you see growth happening in these moments for everybody. Like, I don't leave a pitch that I go, I haven't learned something massive out of, or a big
Yeah.
client meeting. Yeah, it's funny you were saying before, you triggered something in my brain. It's happened a lot today, obviously. The the moments of realization of growth. And I have this thought, I drive every day, I drive home the same way as you do, and there's a moment on the way home where I have a bit of a self-reflection. It started organically. It was sort of just at the traffic lights. I always get stuck at these lights, and I do that. Okay, how was today? Let's check in. How did you go, Ames? Like, where was your energy? Where were you at? And I've been doing it for years since I moved into this house. And when I was running RMD, I used to get to these traffic lights and I'd think, I didn't grow today. I didn't. And I'd reached a bit of a plateau of growth in what I was experiencing. And anyhow, I took this job, and 6 months in, I was at the traffic lights and I was doing shit and swearing. And I was like, okay, this is uncomfortable. And I've had this thought a lot, and I tell people this story. I'm like, you're not enjoying it because it's not always enjoyable to be
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable, but it's what you've been craving. So you've got
Mm-hmm.
to enjoy that this is what you asked for.
Yeah, yeah. This is the ride.
And you will reflect, and like you'll reflect in time at this same spot every night that you look back on this moment and go, you were uncomfortable, but something good came out of that. You know, you reflected, you optimized, you looked at how you showed up, you looked at whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And the ritual for me and the frequency of where
Mm.
am I, how uncomfortable am I? And you can't be in that real uncomfortable moment for a long, long time, because I
Yeah.
think it causes you to spiral.
Yeah.
But you need moments of it. And
Yeah.
for me, when I'm stagnating, I know at the traffic lights that I didn't push myself hard enough, or I didn't push the team hard enough, or so yeah, I think about the rituals that you put around
Yeah.
reflection as
Yeah.
a really important barometer, I guess, of barometer of where you're at in
Yeah.
your growth.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love the traffic lights because it is like what we do daily or what we do frequently is are the things that actually shift us the most, right? Like doing something once is not the same as doing something, nearly every day at the traffic lights. So I love that story of the traffic lights. And I also love what you're articulating around you don't see the growth when you're in the uncomfortable bit, right? Like
No,
growth is
this
an
feels
outcome.
horrible.
Yeah, it does. And it's uncertain and it can be really difficult and hard. But once you're through it and you look back, there is,
Mm.
assuming you look back, which you obviously do at the traffic lights every day.
Every day. If you ever see me looking out the window at the St Ives traffic lights, you know what's going on.
But that's when the growth happens. And it's a consequence of figuring out how to navigate all those pieces and, learn what I can do better, what I need to do differently. I tried that and that didn't go so great. So now I'm going to try it differently. It's life is a series of mini experiments, which you're always getting feedback on. It's whether you take that feedback and do something with it. And I actually think, so talking to, lots of people around the concept of uncomfortable growth, so many people talk about their energy coming from that cycle, the uncomfortable growth cycle. So I think that's a really fascinating connection that you made as well. And people all say, and I know from my own experience, like you can't just be in that intense, uncomfortable growth forever. You really need to go through the cycle of, intensity and then a bit of renewal. And then you might be ready for something new again.
And
Because
it's in the renewal for me is the reflection.
yeah.
Because it's sometimes quite hard in the moment. You're right, you optimize.
Yeah.
But when you're in that swirl,
Yep.
you don't always see it as clearly as when you're through one side or the other, whether it's good
Yeah.
or bad.
You're in the thick of it.
But the renewal's right, but the reflection that comes at that moment for
Mm.
me is often when I'm the clearest. It's
Mm.
that's what happened. And it's what I think again, to go back to COVID, I don't know, I've become COVID obsessed this way. It's because I had COVID last week. That's what it
Yeah.
is. But if I go back to that, I think it's what so many people grappled with is there wasn't moments of reprise, of reflection, of renewal. It was constant. And so again, a massive lesson is you need to create those moments, either moments of joy or moments of just taking the edge off for people, whether it was the WhatsApp groups that you were sending silly jokes around, like
Yeah.
you needed moments to come out of it, walk around the block, whatever it was. And that's just, again, I think that basic how you manage yourself to me was never as heightened as them, but the lessons are really pertinent for how you manage yourself always.
Yeah. And how do you sustain energy? Because, like you can burn out, it's if you keep full throttle all the time, then you're not allowing yourself to renew and you're not necessarily getting the reflection. And, burnout can happen. So it is so important to self-manage and know where your energy is at, like feel it. That's why we both went to Fiji.
It's why I try and do a
Separately for
holiday every
listeners. We
4
both
or
went to
5.
Fiji separately.
Strongly recommend.
Exactly. Well, it's been amazing chatting with you,
Awesome.
Aimee.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
so
So good to
much.
catch up.
Yeah. Okay. Take care. If you are inspired but thinking, I can't do that, then you are so wrong. Anyone can learn the art of uncomfortable growth with the help of my flagship program, Uncomfortable Growth, Own Your Reinvention. In this, you will learn to navigate your own internal contradictions to finally unlock the courage and commitment to live a deeply meaningful life by design and on your terms. Uncomfortable growth is about the struggle and joy in discovering who you are, what you truly want, and how to make it happen. If this is something you are ready for, then find out more at www.rowenamillward.com. What have you got to lose, or more importantly, gain?